that followed, it has actually changed and is changing the landscape of discipleship. So I've invited two guests to join me in talking about that today. Reverend Zach Coffin, who is our CMAD Director of Next Gen Multiplication and Discipleship. So
Great
Zach,
to be with you, Kim.
glad
Always
you're
good.
here. And Reverend Phil Tague from the Ransom Church in South Dakota,
right.
Cutting Edge Church in our Wesleyan denomination. Glad to have you here.
Great to be here.
Wonderful. You know, as I just think about this topic and as we begin this conversation, Zach, I'm going to start with you. You know, it has been said that we live in an accelerated and complex culture, that everything's moving faster and faster, and it's getting more and more complex. When we just begin to think about this topic, what do you consider to be some of the distinctive marks or challenges about discipleship in this digital age?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think we really have to wrestle with, and first of all, I think just even acknowledging that technology has changed how we disciple, or should change that we disciple. Sometimes I think the church doesn't necessarily, I mean, churches in the big church, the big C church, doesn't necessarily adapt quickly to change. And this is an accelerated culture. You know, one of the things that gets kind of thrown around in youth ministry all the time is we used to be able to do things in like 20-year blocks of strategy, or then it was 10-year blocks. And now it's like culture's changing so fast now that 1 year to the next, you know, in youth ministry and kids ministry, we're having to reinvent and shift and mold and be adaptable. And so one of the things I coach people on all the time is just our discipleship models when it comes to Next Gen, they have to be agile and adaptable to the change. So it's not a question of if change is happening, but how do we do that in a way where we don't build systems that are so concrete that we can't change them?
Phil, when you think about this whole concept of doing discipleship in a digital age, or when we say digital age, what's coming to mind? What are some of the things, the changes?
Yeah, well, you talk about the tensions for discipleship, and I think that discipleship in itself is a little more of a slow crock-pot type process, and you've got to figure out how to make that process that is slower accessible faster, which seems to work against one another. And so a lot of times we just kind of say, well, there's nothing we can do, and we keep trying to get people into discipleship as we have known it using mediums that they don't understand. And I think that we don't have a choice. We have to realize technology has to be, if not the primary, at least one of the mediums that we use in order to make this timeless thing called discipleship accessible to more and more people.
When you say that we as a church have to think about technology more, Zach, what do you mean by that? What are some of the thoughts that we have to have?
Oh,
Because
man.
I'm
Yeah.
sitting here from another generation, and
Yeah, I mean, one thing one of the things that comes to mind is I think the language that we use around technology. Sometimes what can happen is we talk about technology in a negative way, and all the negativity around technology and all the negative stigmas that come with that, and realizing that this generation doesn't really view technology, generally speaking, as a negative thing. And so when we hear it from a church perspective of negativity or unplug all the time, it can kind of be this like paradoxical viewpoint for them where they're like, culture's telling me technology is good, church might not necessarily say that it's a good thing, and how do we engage in that? And I think one of the biggest ways that I think the church is going to continue to wrestle with technology is, I mean, really our phones. You know, our phones are a huge part of this. Like, on average, millennials are spending somewhere between about 2,700 hours a year on their phones. And we're still discovering what we do with that information or how we craft that. But I think we have to at least begin to wrestle with the fact of that phones are the primary discipler in our culture right now. For good, bad, otherwise, our screen time is our primary discipler. And so what does it look like for the church to learn to leverage that?
Right. Yeah, and I would add to that, we simultaneously, like for our young people, we vilify technology. You got to get off the screen, which is true, but we act like we're technology averse.
Right.
You know, in my generation and the next generation, That's not true. You know, farmers are using digital
goodness,
GPS navigating on their you know, combines, and all the way to every one of us has multiple devices. You know, we all have smartphones. We all have Netflix. We all have Disney Plus. You know, so we're not as, you know, the thought in the church is we're just not technology experts. That's the next generation. You don't have to be an expert. It's part of your life every single day.
So good. Yep.
And I think that we need to acknowledge the reality of that. Not embrace, you know, we don't have to embrace it, but we have to acknowledge it, and we have to navigate it.
So I hear you both saying that the first step is that we acknowledge this. We're not going backwards.
No.
It's here to stay, and so the church has to begin to adapt. And you know, I thought that point that you brought up, Zach, that to be careful of being negative, because you know sometimes that can come across that we're against technology. Or I love your point that people from, particularly you represent, you know, the younger generation, and saying that, hey, that can be offensive if we're constantly just portraying technology as a negative. So I think that's a real helpful point right there.
Well, one of the places that I see this come up sometimes, and so hear me out, don't check out, hear me out, is like when it comes to like, do we take our phones on youth events, or do we take our phones on those types of things? And I know some of us have policies of like no phones, no phones, no phones, and I'm not saying we should do away with that policy, but I think we really need to wrestle with the unintended consequences of some of those policies, of what that communicates, and say, is the unintended consequence worth the other, and vice versa? And we might come to the same conclusions, but at least being willing to wrestle with those things, especially when parents, as millennials, are viewing phones differently. And so even as a parent, like, I want my kid to have a phone, or what, you know, like those things that we just have to wrestle with those things. We just have to wrestle with it. We might come to similar conclusions, but I think we'll come to better answers if we just wrestle with it.
You know, I think you bring up something that I think about when the answering phone first came out. So I was around for that.
That's awesome.
And my father would call me. I worked at Eastman Kodak Company. My father could not understand how he could leave a message. So he thought he had to shout. So he'd call and leave a message. Kim, this is your father. Call me. You know? And I just think for every generation, we're presented with this technological advancements that are just moving.
By the way, for those who don't know, an answering machine is a machine that used to collect your voicemail before there was voicemail. Okay.
And
yeah, that's right.
Just to add to that, people don't really leave voicemails anymore either.
No, they don't.
So that's a whole nother thing culturally. It's like, anyway, it's funny.
Okay, so this is
funny.
a two-part. One part for you, Zach, and then Phil. Okay. First, Zach, I want you to talk about just how, say, the generation that you minister to, how do they, what are they doing with technology? What does it mean to them? What are some of the things we need to just be mindful of?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all hear the news of the stories of like the downs, like social media is their environment, right? So it's like, and there is some very reasonable tension around the effects of social media. The research around social media can be very, very scary at times. And so they're looking to social media and technology for those places of relationship. So now the hard part is we don't always find the authentic connection that we want to. It's almost like it can be like social media can sometimes be a plastic facade of what a relationship is. And so how do we help students be so secure in their identity that social media doesn't taint it without telling them just to completely pull away from it? So again, it comes back to kind of what we started the conversation as, of how do we help instill some of these values in these students so that technology really is a tool and a great environment that they're living in, and so that they can thrive in the midst of some of those hard things.
Yeah, that's good.
So Phil, I want to ask you the follow-up to this is that what do I need to be thinking about as a pastor? Because you know, our pastors, we have a wide range of ages and stages and locations where we're ministering from. But when you think across the board, as a pastor, I'm a pastor, I'm listening, I'm tuning in, what do I need to at least be thinking about when it comes to technology?
Yeah. Well, that's great. I think there's kind of two ways two parts of that answer. So first of all, I think it's really easy, and we've seen it through time to jump to a conclusion about a lot of things. That if evil is a possibility through this medium is evil, right? So we jump to this conclusion of fear and avoidance. When you play that out, like none of us should be driving cars because there are car accidents. None of us should be flying on planes because there are plane accidents. Things like that. Technology definitely has a dark side, no question. And so, as a pastor, a local pastor, the other part of this is how do we feed people spiritually, and how do we help them navigate how their soul interacts in a technological world? I think that's a really, really important question. So it's not about avoidance as much as it's about temperance. That's a scriptural idea. We know from Scripture too much of anything can be really, really unhealthy. And anything to excess tends to take us outside of God's will. So what does excess look like as far as amount of screen time, as far as the content that we take in? But those are not different lessons than we've been teaching people on any topic over any years. It is moving faster, and it gets scary for pastors because it's kind of a new world. So I would just say to pastors, don't think that your job is to compete with those who make their whole living off of technology with Hollywood and social media platforms. You don't have to compete with them, but neither do we have the freedom to not be present, to ignore them. They are a reality, like it or not.
So you're saying we don't have the freedom to not engage?
Correct.
Okay. Well, let me push you on that. Should every church have a Facebook page?
No, because some churches have really crappy Facebook pages.
The truth.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh, that was awesome.
Every church should be having this conversation. I would say this.
Yeah, that's fair.
If technology overwhelms you, don't try to do it all. Do something.
Okay.
Like you have to have a digital presence in some way. If for you that is a web page, don't do a web page and a Facebook page and have a decent web page.
Wow.
Find people who know stuff that you don't know, and have them help you. But make sure whatever your presence is, that is quality, but not fake to who you are. It is a real digital picture of who you are that actually matches. Nothing's worse than going to a website and going, "This is so cool," and getting to the church and you're like, "This isn't like the website at all." And it's not that the church was bad; it just doesn't match.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. The church is awesome, but the web presence is terrible. And one of the things that we're learning is that your web page or your web presence is no longer a side door. It is the front door of your church. It's the front door of your church. The number of people who check out a web page before they go to the church is just extremely high. And so you got to think of that as the new front door of your church.
Wow.
Yeah, and one of the things I would add to that when you're talking about web pages, like don't feel this pressure to have this full built out website. So sometimes, this is too, like your website are all the multiple pages and all that stuff happening all the time.
Right.
And I appreciate that you brought up the web page ideas, like keep it simple, keep it clean, keep it authentic to who you are because it is your front door. Yep. And so it's a lot better to keep it simple and keep it clean for the sake of engagement versus trying to be super complex and just not doing it well.
I think those are two really good points in terms of you said that we need to at least as pastors be thinking about and having a conversation about this. But you're saying that don't try to go out and be someone you're not. Nope. Have this real hip thing if that's not your church. We've got a question in the chat room, so let's take that. Would you be able to share some examples of how churches are currently implementing discipleship using apps, programs, social media, etc.? Wow, that's where we were going. So let's go there. So I'm gonna come to Phil. Yep. and just talk about what you're doing there at Ransom Church, and also invite others. If keep those questions and comments. We want you to be a part of the conversation. Phil.
Yeah. So we were realizing. Let's back it up and even just have the discipleship conversation first. So we had to ask ourselves, what are we trying to accomplish in discipleship? What is discipleship really? And we came to the conclusion, at least for ourselves, that discipleship has, for a lot of years in the church, been defined as a destination. You go to like class 101, 201, 301, now I'm discipled, I've arrived, I'm done, or whatever the case may be. But it's an acquiring of biblical knowledge, which is part of what discipleship is. We came to the conclusion that discipleship is less about destination and more about direction. Am I pointed towards Jesus, and am I inviting someone to go with me? If I'm pointed toward Jesus, I'm moving towards him. Doesn't matter how mature I am, there's somebody behind me and I can bring them with. And that opens up discipleship and the ability to be a discipler to a lot of people. But when you open up discipleship to a lot of people, one of the problems you run into is those people aren't always equipped. That's where tools come in, right? So sometimes that tool is a book or a curriculum or an idea or a way of thinking or a video study. We were asking ourselves, what is the journey? If we had somebody who said, I don't know if I could be a discipler, but if you could give me some steps, what's the journey we would want to take people on? And so we had a team put together, and they built what we call our discipleship pathway, which is an online tool. It used to be on our website, and we just realized that there's a greater application for churches that maybe can't develop this for themselves. And so we have an online tool that anybody can use that is a 10-module. It's not a curriculum, it's just a tool for conversation. And so the way that we designed it is, you get into a module, you start talking about that topic. Maybe that module, it has 4 lessons per module. Maybe that module you go through in 4 weeks. You meet once a week and you go through, and it was great stuff and you learn, and then you run to the next module and you run into something in that person's life that causes you to go, we have to pause. Well, the way this thing is designed is, go ahead, pause, do whatever you need to do to have that conversation, and then hop back into it's all it is a tool to help you in the conversational journey. And so we just realized if we could produce something that, because when we talk to people, their greatest hang up with discipleship, everybody wanted to be discipled. And they might use a different word. I want to be mentored. Everybody wants someone to pour into their life, right? That's just what they want. So we just started going, well, why won't you be a discipler? And it always came down to, I just don't know what to say. And we began to ask people, well, if we created a tool that could help you have that conversation, would you have it? And they could, every one of them said, absolutely, and I already know who I'm going to have it with. They could identify their disciple that they did not feel equipped to disciple, and we gave them a tool, and it just started happening.
Wow.
So.
Phil, I think that what you've done there at Ransom Church with this pathway that's so mobile is a game changer, because everyone wants to be discipled and people want to disciple people. But I have to confess, I also was one of those who think, well, what's being transferred? What are you multiplying? What are you duplicating here? And so you provided a framework. I had an opportunity. In fact, I'm going to use it in my next discipleship relationship. I've got two young people who are starting in about a week.
Awesome.
And I'm going to switch now. I'm going to test out. I'm going to test drive.
Awesome.
I'm going to test drive this because I can pull it up on my phone. I can pull it up even me. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a big endorsement for, even me, even someone that like myself can pull this up, can use it. And there's some flexibility. So I'm going to tweak some things to make it, work with our community.
Yeah, the important thing to understand is this is just a tool. There are other tools out there. In fact, giving credit where credit is due, they were on staff with us, Pastor Phil Wise and Pastor Megan Cook, were authors of a lot of this pathway. They've gone on, we sent them out as a church plant. They planted the Table Church in Des Moines, Iowa. And they have their own version of this that they now have called, and it's at discipleshippath.org, I believe. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Table Church, if I'm wrong. But they have another version, same thing, if that one resonates with you. But both of them go along the same premise of what are the steps we need people to take, and they start and end with the idea that you make an agreement when you get into it. I'm being discipled, but by the end of this, I'm going to be a disciple maker.
The multiplication
and that multiplication piece is built in.
Yeah. Well, I want to say thank you on behalf of churches who just would not have the ability to create something like this. Sure. And thank you for being willing to share, and also is it Table Church?
Table Church.
Table Church. Thank Table Church for being willing to share share this with
Yeah.
our Wesleyan family, and I mean it's incredible. We've got another question that's come in, so let me go to the next question. And someone is asking, do you think that pastors and or churches are scared of technology because then people will just stay home and not want to come to church? And assuming that some people might think that they don't need community or being together with others. What do you think?
Yeah. So I absolutely do think that if we have a fear, some of the fear is around the technology itself. We just don't know it. We don't understand it. But I do think there is that fear. Well, what if people start doing that and they don't come to church? What we have found is it's simply not true. Like people who are never going to connect, never connect. But within the hearts and souls of most people is a desire for fellowship, for relationship. I think the important thing to note is when we create, whether it's the discipleship tool or an online worship service experience, the goal is not to replace the fellowship of church. The platform is designed to push them there. But again, the thing that we're offering, the thing that we're drawing people to is a relationship with God and a relationship with others. That can be entered into digitally, but it can't be sustained digitally. And people realize that. I think there's a point that people come to and they just go, I've got to be there. So the majority of our usage actually now is for people who are traveling and they don't want to miss church, or they move to a new community and they want to bring church to that community and they're doing watch parties in their house and things like that. So even the majority of the places that the digital presence is being used is within the context of a relational community.
And I think we have to be, to piggyback on that, I think we have to be really honest and really wrestle with kind of the question behind that question of what are we afraid we're losing if we're in those digital spaces. So, what is it that we're actually scared of them not coming to service as this a replacement? Is it actually that we're actually scared that they're not coming? Is it scared that they're going to find it somewhere else? Is it scared that their tithe isn't going to come? Like, what is it that we're actually scared of? And that just takes a lot more, I think, reflection, like introspection to really wrestle with. What are we actually saying we're worried about losing when we start entering this digital space? Because for the coming generations, they see so much connection. So the thing that we're actually afraid we're losing is actually what this generation actually sees that they're gaining by leveraging technology.
You know, I was speaking with a pastor just last week, and she was saying that her church community is very intentional about wanting to preserve the pieces that don't happen in technology, like the meal that they do at the church and the grouping around tables, and just saying that, you know, there were, she was concentrating on pieces that she knew couldn't be duplicated, while they did offer, those
cool.
digital options, but not forgetting to think about that. I want to go back to this whole topic, because when we talk about disciples making disciples, and we talk about someone who, you know, you're a little further along on the journey than the person who comes to the Lord a month behind you, and now you're going to decide. This is actually representing kind of a change, and it's a challenge for some cultures where, in some cultures, it's the expert, it's the spiritual authority, it's the spiritual mother or father that you listen to, not someone who, you know, is a month beyond you. So, talk about that.
Yeah, and I mean, in no way do I want to minimize the value of a spiritual mentor, a wise sage in your life. But number one, just the way that culture has gone, there are less wise sages, right?
Point taken. Yes.
You know, there are
Unfortunately,
also lots of people in churches who have should be the wise sages, but have a fear of taking up that mantle in the world that we're living in. And so we're not trying to minimize or mitigate that, but so much of that approach has really valued biblical knowledge as the key thing. This incorporates not only biblical knowledge, but, you know, what does holy obedience look like? What does spiritual intimacy look like? What does it look like to be a follower? You know, a true follower of Jesus, and that's something that you do together. And so, I'm not, you know, like when we look at Scripture, we see Jesus heals the demoniac, like who's run around in the cemetery, and the guy says, "Hey, let me go with you." And he says, "No, no, no, no. You have to disciple your family. Like, you have to go back and you have to engage." That guy has been a believer for like a minute. Right? His repertoire of biblical knowledge is not deep. His time with Jesus is not deep. But it was that indication of, like, you're still journeying. And I think that's the key part. Like, to those who have been Christians for a long time and your biblical knowledge is deep, I would say take the faith step of inviting someone to go with you, because you know more than anybody you're still growing. If you're not still growing, that's a whole different problem.
For sure. Well, and I'd say for kids ministry and youth ministry folks, I'd go, like, sometimes we go, well, I don't understand the culture, I don't understand technology, how can I disciple a teen? Like, I don't know where their world is. And study after study has shown that you don't need to know that stuff to be able to disciple a kid. Like, you don't need to be like, you don't need to have the skinny jeans or know what TikTok is, and you can Google it later. Like, you don't have to know what these things are to be able to disciple. Like, they want someone who authentically is present in their life. And so, like, we need more mothers and fathers for our younger generation who are present. Like, presence is, I think, 8/10 of the value is just being able to be present in the good and the bad, and being okay with not knowing everything when it comes to technology and culture and all that stuff. Like, it's okay.
Well, and that's where the digital tool comes in. So we've given enough of a framework so that if you don't know everything, it's not going to let you, veer grossly off course. It's going to guide the conversation. But there's nothing like discipling someone to put the onus on you to get in your word, to get in the word, and to be growing yourself. So I'm not saying, hey, if you're an immature Christian, just stay immature and then disciple people into that immaturity. And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, as you're growing, as you're moving towards Jesus, you may as well bring somebody with you.
That's good.
Now, see, I love the way you have worded that just now to help us have a better understanding. Let me just bring in a couple comments that have been coming in. Not questions necessarily, but just some comments. One says, a great book that echoes and expands on the concept of discipleship as a trajectory rather than a destination, as you highlighted, Phil, is Daniel Imes' No Silver Bullets.
Yep.
So somebody's
one.
brought that up.
Yep.
Another comment's come in, said, you're nailing it. Digital natives and millennials are doing all those relational things well already. If we fight it, we're simply excluding ourselves from the conversation and telling them our discipleship is irrelevant to their digital lives. And so those are just some comments. Now, Zach, I'm going to turn to you up. Now that we're talking digital, there's a book I've heard about that you've been kind of toting.
Yeah.
Faith for Exiles.
Yes. Look at how pretty this color is. Yes. Okay. Yeah, it's a really great book, and they use this framework of students living in digital Babylon. And what they mean by digital Babylon is, like, again, that young people are in that world of the digital. So it's not gone are the days of just having to teach them how to navigate physical spaces. Like, that used to be the primary focus, is how do we teach them to be safe, or how do we teach them to go to their school and be a believer? Like, it used to be all about the physical space. And now the reality is we're trying to teach people how to navigate discipleship and follow Jesus, not only in a digital or a physical space, but also in a digital space. And not only a digital space, but a digital Babylon that's just like Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so, again, we can have this negative perspective that it's Babylon and it's terrible, but what if we actually took this perspective going, let's instill identity, let's instill presence, let's instill these things in them so that they can be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and actually go prosper in digital Babylon versus suffering and all those type of things. Like, let's empower them to live really well in digital Babylon.
I love that. I mean, that's what the Old Testament was talking about, right? When the prophets would speak to the people about the Babylonian exile, which was going to last 70 years, I mean, God said, settle in, start families.
That's right.
You're going to be in this place for a while. And I think that's the reality. Technology is not going away. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not going away. We can want it to, we can wish it to, it's not going away. We can either utilize that for the kingdom or we can be irrelevant. Mm-hmm. And that's, at least in that space.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
And that is the message that people didn't want to hear. That is precisely the message that settle. What do you mean settle in? Mm-hmm. Seek the peace of this place.
Yeah. And remember too, Babylon was thriving.
It was.
So as Babylon's thriving, why not let the church thrive as well? And when when we're able to help send our students and our kids into, like, one of the things that I've really, I actually recently had a friend who is, he's a digital missionary, basically. Like, he's in the streaming, he's like in the video game streaming industry as a believer, and his whole platform is bringing positivity and Christ to that digital space. He got a lot of pushback from people like, oh, how, like, you're not pastoring anymore, you're not doing all these types of things, and he's viewing himself as a real digital missionary. And as technology, you and I were talking about this before we even jumped on the show, what does it look like for the church to actually begin to experience like a supernatural empowerment that brings technology to the world through the church versus the church even responding to technology?
Yep.
Like, what if God actually wants to raise up programmers and coders and all these types of just amazing skill sets through Kingdom Calling, through the church, to unleash that on the world? Yeah. Maybe that's actually one of the ways God wants to bring a revival, is actually through technology, through God's people finding their kingdom calling through technology.
Yeah, I love that.
You know, when I think about the things that we're talking about, this whole concept of a digital Babylon, that just kind of has piques an interest because of the parallels that we can draw, and how Daniel was in the midst of, I mean, in that culture, he was forced to learn the language, he had to study the history, he had to learn about all kinds of things he might not have wanted to know, but he had to when he was at the King's University there, he had to learn all of those things. He's immersed in that, and yet he was still able to keep who he was, keep his relationship with God. And so I want to bring in the other part that while he was in digital Babylon was that he had spiritual disciplines. He had the discipline of prayer. So he had a plan for how he was going to survive, or he had a routine, he had a rhythm that assisted him for thriving in digital Babylon.
Absolutely. Yeah, in this book, they highlight 5 different ways that are proactive and positive. Like, sometimes when we talk about, again, you read Barna studies or whatever, you can get really sad about these things. But this book really highlights 5 ways for the next generation to follow Jesus in that space. And the first practice that they talk about for people to really be able to thrive in that digital Babylon is that they've really had they actually have an authentic, intimate relationship with Jesus. And so sometimes as we start talking about that technology, we can think that we need all these special things to have happen, but it brings back to this core of, like, are we teaching students how to encounter Jesus for themselves and in community? Like, when our seat is intimacy with Jesus, our identity is with him, we're secure in him. Same with Daniel. Daniel wasn't swayed by that. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were able to stand up because they said, my God will come through. They knew their God. They knew who he was. And so then those young students were able to stand up. And I just think we've got to realize, like, are we just toting information, or are we toting experience? Because if we're helping people experience the presence of Jesus, information will come and will actually empower them to live rightly.
Okay. Let me throw this to you. What are the cautions for discipleship in this digital age? We've talked about some of the positives.
Yeah.
What are some of the cautions?
Well, I mean, as long as we're running with this analogy of digital Babylon, I would just say, don't mistake digital presence for a compromise of values, right? You go back to the story of Daniel and Babylon. They are living in Babylon. They are learning that culture, and in order to be effective, they had to learn the culture and hold to their values. So what I would say is, as you encounter this idea of digital presence, don't try to be something other than the church on that digital presence. What we do best, we are the church. That's who we are. We do church like nobody else does church, right? Hollywood can't touch us. Social media trends can't touch us. Be the church. Just do church well online. That's what I say. But don't quit being the church. Don't change your values. Don't change be the church online.
It's really good.
I think that's good. One of the things, just while I have you here, Phil, when I think about our discipleship prompts, I had to work that into the conversation, our discipleship prompts being intentional, relational, holistic, multiplying, and lifelong. When I think about that as lens through which we view our discipleship, and I think about Ransom Church, I kind of get excited because I see you really just hitting some of those, just hitting
Sure.
a number of those in terms of intentional, like this discipleship pathway, the game changer that is relational, safe families. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? I know we're talking about digital, but,
Yep.
but
Yep. So Safe Families for Children is a national ministry that we got involved with. Ransom Church brought us to the state of South Dakota. And it works with families who are at risk of losing their kids to the foster care system and having to get involved. Before the state gets involved, it allows the church to come alongside and just be advocates, be a friend, host the kiddos while mom gets help with whatever she needs help with, come alongside with a coach and all of that. And interestingly enough, a lot of that relationship is digital, right? It's the mom in the middle of the night texting saying, "Hey, I just really need I have somebody I can reach out to when I feel alone." So our approach there is just like our approach with digital and our approach with Safe Families is the same. How do we get into the environments where we can engage in the conversations with people who just are not coming into the walls of the church? They're not coming. And whether it's the digital pathway that people take or through Safe Families, the end result of loving people with the love of Christ is the body.
That's good, man.
and then
So
holistic, your ransom recovery ministries multiplying. How many churches did you guys start this year?
We sent teams to plant 2 churches, and we started a 3rd church plant hybrid in the Iowa-Minnesota district.
So you're multiplying,
Yeah.
and now Lifelong's our last one, and so just engaging people over time,
Yeah, I mean, so an analogy that we've used is if my life is like a 50-gallon oil drum, right? Your life, my life, probably has 1,000 holes drilled in it. Those are all different things. They're all different. Some of them are lacks of knowledge. Some of them are heart issues. Some are obedience issues. And they're all at different levels. And we're trying to minister to people. What's the lowest hole? Because it doesn't matter if you fix this up here. If you fix all the biblical knowledge issues in somebody's life, but none of the spiritual intimacy issues,
Yes.
they can only hold, their life can only hold as much water as the lowest
good
hole,
image. I
right?
love that.
So our holistic approach is just, our vision is setting captives free. And when you think about that, beyond just a salvation commitment, how much holds people captive in this world? Oh my goodness, right? And so everything we do is designed to try to help people take that next step and holistic. And even our focus in the last few years now on not only growing by addition, but also multiplying and sending out and creating disciple makers is we're starting to have not just leadership conversations, but legacy conversations. What do we want to leave for the next generation? And what we're finding is if we don't make ourselves relevant in the digital world, it's not going to matter.
Wow. That also brings to mind for me the emotionally healthy discipleship curriculum that we have available, because you're right. You've got, underneath, if you can have all the biblical knowledge, you can have been walking with the Lord for 20 zillion years, but if there are these iceberg issues that you've never addressed, it's going to affect your life. It's going to affect your ministry. I want to hop back. We're talking this whole conversation, discipleship in a digital age. Zach, you've got an event that's coming up because you are ministering to this generation that is right in the thick of it. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to invite you to Follow. There's still time to register. For those of you who may not know about Follow is our denomination's largest event. It's our International Wesleyan Youth Convention. And so it's this December. And again, there's still time for you to register. We've got an incredible lineup of people with Danielle Strickland, Corey Asbury and his team are leading worship, Andy Minio, some other communicators as well. They're going to be, it's just going to be an incredible time. But what I'm most excited about beyond all the hype stuff is our heart's cry really is for this generation to experience the more that God has. So the theme this year is There is More. And it really is it's this heart cry that they experience the more that God has for them, that it's more of His Holy Spirit, more disciple making, more kingdom calling, that they really find their place as Christ's followers in this age. And so we're getting together for 3 days just to press into God's presence and ask Him to show up. And so we'd love to have you come at followconference.org. You can check out registration there. And we're just really asking God to show up uniquely, because we really believe that if we just make ourselves available to what God has for us, that He's going to ignite a revival fire like we haven't seen. And so we're asking for God to do some incredible things. We're gonna pray and ask God to do some revival style things. So now we're excited.
We'll be praying with you on that. I thank you both, because you've given us something just to think about, no matter where we are in our journey with technology in our churches. You've given us the concept that we have to have the conversation. It's not going away. We have to think about that, how we're approaching it, what messages we're sending. You've given us an opportunity to have a tool that could be customized to our own church or our own context. So any last thoughts about this concept of discipleship in a digital age? Is there anything, a last comment or thought that comes to mind?
I mean, I'd say just take a chance and engage somehow. Continue to learn, continue to grow. Don't let our hesitancies of the unknown or the unsure keep us from asking God to reveal Himself in a digital age. Like, what does it really look like for us as the church to thrive in this digital Babylon, and not be scared of that, but to actually take some risks and unleash people to take those greater risks? Because to step into technology, it's going to take some risks, and don't be scared of the risk, but ask God to show you what that looks like.
And I would speak to, so I want to talk to those of you out there who, you still have a flip phone, right? You're refusing to, you're mad because Verizon's going to kick you off and make you get a smartphone, or you still got a dumb phone, and who almost are belligerently like, what's technology? What's the internet? What is this thing? I would just encourage you, if I told you that there was a way out there that you could tap into hundreds of millions of people who will never enter the doors of your church with the gospel, and all you had to do was download an app, would you do it? Because that's really the conversation we're having.
That's good.
Don't be stubborn about this. Somebody somewhere in the world needs your preaching, your teaching, your gospel presence. There's enough other garbage out there. We need to get out there. We need to proliferate the gospel as well.
That's good, man.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about. We always end our conversations with the rapid fire round. So, Phil, you ready?
Sure, let's do this.
What's the quantum theory of... No, I'm just teasing.
I was ready. 12.
Just teasing, okay.
Niner,
All right,
I'd say.
We'll go with this one instead.
All right.
Your best discipleship tip.
Best discipleship tip is just don't say you can't do it.
Okay. Zach, your best discipleship tip.
Find a youth ministry and a kids ministry and go do it.
There you
Just
go.
go do it.
All right.
I love that.
Definition of a disciple.
So we actually define this in our church. We came to the conclusion it's someone who can recognize and respond to the voice of God and teach others to do the same.
Zach?
Somebody who's pursuing Jesus.
Okay. Greatest discipleship disappointment.
Mature Christians who just refuse to be a disciple maker.
Zach?
The greatest discipleship disappointment. Probably my failings. Probably the ways that I'm trying to follow Jesus, and I just don't always feel like, because I don't know that I always feel like I can disciple people, but still doing it in the midst of that. But yeah.
Yeah. Mine is thinking of people who have been in my church, and I feel like I could have done a better job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I could have done a better job.
Yep.
I didn't prepare them in a certain area. So loving the tool, wanting all of us, we're all wanting to do better in this area. And finally, a fond memory of a discipleship success story.
So the thing that makes discipleship beautiful is when it becomes generational, right? So I have been in ministry for 20 some years, and the first guy I discipled went into the discipleship pathway with me, saying I can't disciple anyone. Within 2 months, he'd already knew who he was supposed to disciple. Within 4 months, he was already discipling him, and now that guy's discipling someone else. So when you begin to see that, and they all live in the same neighborhood, so when you begin to see the power of Christ in a neighborhood, most of whom doesn't attend your church, and the neighbor's wife is going, will you disciple my husband? He's hungry, like he's looking for something. Like, where does that happen? So that's my fondest memory, just seeing that exponential power in such a short time, less than a year.
Yeah. Mine actually just happened about a month ago. I was down in North Carolina doing a wedding for a student that I've been walking with for 12 years. And so to see Justin as a 17-year-old to now that getting to do that wedding and seeing how he's the man of God that he's become was just one of those youth pastor moments where my heart was just full because it's like discipleship over time, it was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Think of the kingdom force that we talk about here in the denomination, releasing it. We were supposed to be at the end, but there's a question that's come in. I want to throw it out
All right.
to you. Let's not leave it hanging. The question says, what are some ideas for utilizing digital resources for discipleship well across generations, i.e. staying relevant without marginalizing older generations? So I just wanted to get that in before we...
Wow, that's a big question.
Mm-hmm.
So 30 minutes.
I would just say this again. Whatever platform, whatever you're comfortable with, there's a level of comfortability that we all have with technology. No matter who you are, even if you're not like digitally savvy, maybe you have the Bible app, maybe you have Facebook. Whatever form of digital presence you already have, there's probably a quality resource out there that you can use that digital platform you already know and understand to disciple someone. So you don't have to, I would just say, you don't have to rethink the wheel. My daughter has the Bible app and went through a season in her life where she was wrestling with some things, and I was able to invite her to do a devotional with me, and cool. She didn't accept at first, and then I thought, okay, what does she really care about? And she's on Snapchat a lot with her friends, and they're always like taking random pictures of like their foot or like the wall just because they want to keep their streak going. Well, awesome. The Bible app has streaks. I said, I'll tell you what, I challenge you to a streak. You do a streak in the Bible app, and you do this devotional with me, and we just kind of made a fun thing out of it, and that's what got her. I was already using the Bible app. It's not new technology. It's just utilizing the technology you already know for the sake of the kingdom.
That's awesome.
Anything you want to add?
That's great.
Okay. No, that is great. I think just encouraging us all that, across the generations, and just like with anything, with any technology that we're using in church, the same thing with anything we're bringing in, you try to integrate it well, mm-hmm. that you try to make it for the use of the people, and it's a tool. And I think I heard you say that earlier. And I think about even in my own life, my nephew communicates with me via text, mm-hmm. and I love punctuation and paragraphs, and mm-hmm. and I had to just come to the point where, and I love things spelled well. Auto check helps with that. Would I rather hear from my nephew and have him in communication with me, even
Absolutely.
though it's, misspellings and not the grammar,
Listen,
or would I rather him not be talking to
me?
The
salsa dancer emoji speaks volumes, right?
So I'd rather have him in communication with me. And
Absolutely.
So now I'm trying to even be less formal, because I found myself writing very formally even in my text.
That's awesome.
What I'm saying is that just the way we would embrace if you were to bring a new instrument into the church, if anything that you bring, if you're bringing drama in, whatever you're bringing in, you look for ways to integrate that and help people across all of the generations come in. And so I think the same thing.
And the heart of evangelism and discipleship has always been, don't expect people to come to where you are, go to where they're at.
Absolutely.
They're online.
Yes.
They are online, and they are texting, and they're on Snapchat. So humble yourself, get over yourself, have your kids show you how to use Snapchat, let them laugh at you, have them show you how, and then figure out how you can leverage it for the kingdom.
Amen. Well, we're going to close. Thank you again, and thanks to all of you who've been part of our virtual community. I hope you'll join us next month. We're going to be Thursday, December 19th. Our discussion is on cultural impacts on discipleship. So we're going to have a couple of different cultures related. We're going to talk specifics about how that things from that culture impact the way they receive different discipleship tools and it's right around the Christmas season, so we'll probably talk a little bit about how those cultures celebrate Christmas. So I hope you can join us, and until then, let's keep on making disciples.